Hello class, Mr. Young here with Chapter 9, Lesson 2. This lesson is called Early Challenges. So let's get into it, shall we? Basically, the war is won, the Constitution's now written, Washington is president. Last lesson we talked about things like forming the judicial branch, forming the cabinet, and a lot of economics and like the formation of the bank, stuff like that. Washington in this lesson is going to face a whole slew of unforeseen problems. Some of these problems were from within, their internal domestic problems. Some of them were external foreign threats. Today we discuss all these problems and basically how they're going to be dealt with. Let's check it out. We're going to start on sort of a dark subject, the Whiskey Rebellion, which is very much a local story here in western Pennsylvania where I'm teaching from. So in the last lesson we learned about Hamilton's economic plans, including new federal taxes. In 1791, Congress passed a tax on the manufacture and sales of liquor. So it was often referred to as the whiskey tax because whiskey was pretty much the main liquor people drank around here. The tax was universally despised throughout the entire country. Basically, one of their most favorite things was now more expensive to produce and sell. In western Pennsylvania, the tax was really, really bad. People were miffed. Why? Because, well, in western PA, they grew a lot of corn, and much of it was used to make whiskey. So it was sort of a hotbed of corn whiskey, so this tax really, really hurt western Pennsylvanians. It was actually considered a form of currency here in western Pennsylvania. People bought and sold things with whiskey. Now, the farmers here, especially in western Pennsylvania, hated the tax so much, this whiskey tax, that they threatened, beat up, and burned down the houses of tax collectors. This army of angry farmers grew and started to become a real problem for the federal government. Basically, the federal government was not collecting any of the whiskey tax in western Pennsylvania because no one left around to collect the tax for them. To deal with this, Washington sent an army to dispel the Whiskey Rebellion and to enforce the tax. The farmers kind of just gave up, so there's no real battles here when they basically heard an army was coming. Some of the leaders were convicted of treason and hanged, which is pretty severe, but many just had to start paying the tax, which was now enforced by soldiers left behind by Washington. The whole incident did show that this new government under Washington was not afraid to flex its muscle to enforce the laws. Yeah, the old tar and feather treatment made a comeback during the Whiskey Rebellion. Now, challenges in the West. The Northwest Territories were a hotbed of trouble for Washington. Basically, the Spanish and British did their part to stir up the natives to get them to attack American settlers. Their hope was that this would prevent the Americans from spreading west too rapidly, always expanding those Americans. Washington, in an attempt to deal with this, signed treaties with the natives in the area, but settlers would ignore these treaties and move where they wanted to anyway. So kind of like that old proclamation line that we talked about way back in maybe one of our first or second chapters we studied, where we would draw lines, say, all right, our people won't go past this line, and then you don't attack us anymore, and then the settlers would go across the line, and then they get attacked. Same thing, different day. So Washington tried to make treaties, but the settlers ignored the treaties. As a result, there were more native attacks on American settlers. Washington had to send an army, which was actually defeated in the Northwest Territory. The natives that time were under a chief by the name of Little Turtle. So Little Turtle was able to defeat American forces. American forces try again later, this time in the year 1794, but it was under the leadership of General Anthony Wayne. He defeated the natives and basically cleared out what would become Ohio of Native American power. So that was called the Battle of Fallen Timbers. There's a picture. I couldn't believe I found a picture of the Battle of Fallen Timbers. So let's move to, those are domestic problems. Let's talk about foreign threats. So in 1793, France had its own revolution to overthrow the monarchy, the French Revolution. If you were in my 7th grade class, we learned about it in pretty good detail. At first, many Americans supported this revolution, but when it turned really violent, some Americans began to think that the French revolutionaries were going too far. France and Britain went to war again that same year. Americans were basically split, with some favoring Britain and some favoring France. During the French Revolution, it got violent. One might say they lost their heads. A little pun. A lot of people got their heads cut off at the guillotine. Right there. That's basically what people associate with the French Revolution. Beheadings. Now, Washington's plan for this little foreign policy disaster was to stay neutral, but this proved difficult. France was trying to recruit American volunteers to attack British ships. The British were seizing American ships that were trading with France. The British had this practice of impressment, where they would take U.S. sailors from ships and force them to serve in the British Navy, much like kidnapping or slavery. Washington issued the Proclamation of Neutrality, saying the U.S. wasn't taking any sides. He then sent John Jay to go make a treaty with the British. Jay's treaty got the British to agree to finally remove all their troops from North America. They still had some fortresses lingering out in the wilderness, but it actually did nothing to address the issue of impressment. Jay's treaty was heavily criticized, but did manage to be approved by the Senate. Now, Jay's treaty made Spain nervous. They thought that the U.S. and Britain were going to collude and team up to take the Spanish out of North America, and that's not good for Spain, obviously. To settle these qualms of Spain, sort of ease them, Washington sent another guy down to talk with the Spanish. His name was Thomas Pinckney. Pinckney's treaty, which was made, gave Americans the right to use the Mississippi River, calmed some of these worries, and also let Americans move their goods to trade at Spanish-controlled New Orleans, all the way down there at the bottom of the Mississippi. Now Washington leaves office. Basically, Washington decided after 2 terms, 8 years as president, that was enough. He was done with it. In his parting address, he said, "'Tis our true policy to steer clear of permanent alliances with any portion of the foreign world, so far, I mean, as we are now at liberty to do it," to George Washington. These words would affect American foreign policy for 100 years. He also warned about factions, which is another word for political parties, and we'll talk about those more in the coming lesson. Wise words, Mr. President, wise words. Let's bump on to our little assessment, shall we? So, here's that quote. In case the picture that works in the video here is not working, it's right here as well. "'Tis our true policy to steer clear of permanent alliances with any portion of the foreign world, so far, I mean, as we are now at liberty to do it." For today's assignment, answer the following question using complete sentences. What does the above quote by Washington at his farewell address mean? And how did he support these words with action during his presidency? So, what's this mean? It seems fairly clear to me, but maybe I'm a history teacher. Also, how did he back it up? What did he do to make that point during his presidency? So there's some stuff in there. If you have any questions, and you very well may, please let me know and shoot me a message. We'll talk it out. That's it for today. I believe if you're doing these lessons on the day that they are actually due, then it's Wednesday and tomorrow's Thanksgiving. Happy Thanksgiving. We'll pick up with lesson 3 on the Monday after your 4-day weekend. All right. Hey, have a good one.